Hello?
Hello?
Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's up?
Is it okay? Like the mic quality?
Yep, it's just fine.
Okay, basically English is not my first language, so forgive me if like anything doesn't come out as it should or anything else.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. So basically I watched the Scuff podcast episode you were on, and you were talking about sex and gender.
Mm-hmm.
And your suggestion was that both are social constructs, and I did not agree with the sex part. I mean, gender, like that's the definition of it. But yeah, I wanted to talk, or basically, I want to convince you that sex is not a social construct, and that you argued that there are no uses in classifying into different sexes, and I wanted to maybe suggest some uses that would.
Well, no, I mean, of course there are uses in having sexes. I mean, we can make broad statements about these two groups of people, right? I'm just saying that sex in and of itself is a social construct. Like we construct categories because they're useful to us, but they don't exist in the as an entity in the natural world.
Okay, then let me try to convince you. Also, maybe or otherwise, my background is in biology, so just so you know. Why are you saying that sex is a social construct?
Because because there's nothing in science, and you've never taken a class before in biology where you've done an experiment and then something is said like this is what sex is. Like that's a definition that we provide that we've decided to create.
Yeah, of course, but that's not like socially constructed. For me, socially constructed would be like, for example, gender is socially constructed because like what makes a man can be socially dependent in different cultures, for example. But what sex you are is not derived from the society you live in. Like a man in, I don't know, Japan is the same as a man in Africa, and yeah.
Only because, but only because broadly we've all socially kind of agreed on that. Like we basically set a definition and then we kind of agree on it, right? Like we could, like one society if they want could, I mean, maybe with the transgender stuff today, I mean, maybe somebody decides that if you go through sexual reassignment surgery or whatever, sex reassignment surgery, that this person is now considered a man or a woman, depending on how you construct your category of sex. I mean, just having a penis, go ahead.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't that supposed to be the whole use of like separating into gender and sex to have exactly like this line where you can say a transgender woman may biologically be a male, but we consider her gender to now be a woman. Isn't that exactly what that like separation is supposed to accomplish?
I mean, it would be nice if it did, but no. I mean, like, I understand what you want to say. Like, we can make descriptive statements about men and women broadly, that we can talk about differences. But the fact that those two categories exist that's just an arbitrary construction. Like we've taken a collection of features and we've decided to assign a category to them, but nowhere in any of your science education are you ever going to find a reason why we do that. Like that reason is ultimately going to be arbitrary.
Yeah, of course, but that would be true for any like classification we make, right? Like,
exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but that's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that so that would be. I don't think we need the suffix like social. Then it would just be constructed like any classification, right?
I mean, I guess
it isn't socially constructed. That's what my issue was. Like,
but I mean,
humans,
well, I mean, it is socially constructed. Like, what other kind of construction is it?
I don't know, a perceptual construction. I don't know. Everything you or like your senses, you construct your reality basically, and just as you construct your reality through your senses, you construct categories through like, as you said, arbitrary observations. But it doesn't mean that the primary cause would be like a social reason. I think in some cases it could be, but I don't think.
Yeah, if it's not a social reason, I mean, what else would it be?
I think it stems from like basically reproduction.
Sure, but why do we value? Why do we value reproduction? Why is that where we decide to draw our lines?
I don't understand, or I don't quite understand the question. Could you like maybe rephrase it?
Sure. So what I think your desire is, you're trying to get at the idea that this scientific category of man versus woman, that this is like a real rigid thing, and it's not like a silly social constructed category like whatever thing we can make up. But in science, we have a real category. But the ultimate reality is that if I keep asking you, well, why do we have this category? And then you give me a certain set of features that is encompassed by man and woman, and I say, okay, well, why do we make the category there? Why not at any other grouping of features? Eventually, what we're going to get back to is some social distinction. You're going to say, well, we've decided that this is more valuable because we're able to utilize this in a way that, for social reasons. When I say social, I mean like in moral reasons, right? In ways that make us happier, in ways that are useful to us.
Okay, yeah, I understand what you're saying. Like, as I said in the email, that maybe we misunderstood, or I misunderstood your point, but I think there are like differences in how we construct gender and how we construct sex, and that they are quite different and can't be subsumed both just simply under social. Because what we say, for example, when we talk about gender, like what it means to be a man, to be like emotionally stoic and things like that, that could be different in different cultures. But I don't think the same can be said for what we consider as a man from the perspective of sex. That's what I was trying to get at.
I mean, even if the definition for a category is common amongst all cultures, that doesn't necessarily make that definition. I still like, I guess like the way that I would find this is like where can you study, like where in science can we find the answer that we ought to make a distinction between men and women, that this is a distinction worth having, that we should recognize and like build a society around.
Yeah, of course you're not going to find things like that in science.
Mm-hmm. And like I understand that, like I mean I'm not going to go full meme and say that like man and woman doesn't refer or make any useful descriptions or differences between the two. I mean I understand these categories exist for a reason, and I understand that there are real distinctions between these two categories. I just think it's important to remember at the end of the day that these are still categories that aren't found in nature anywhere. Like we created them because we found use in them, and that's the only reason they exist.
Yeah, of course, and I would agree with you. But you seem to argue in that podcast that like that there, or my perspective, or what I understood was that there is no use in doing so.
Oh no, I think there definitely is a use. There's a huge. Well, I'm pretty sure there's a use between these distinctions, depending on what case we're talking about. I mean, medically there can be, scientifically there obviously can be, socially probably there is for sure right now. The only thing that I want people to understand is that like every category that we make is ultimately constructed for hopefully some purpose that relates to giving us happiness. And if we're starting to run into a lot of trouble with these categories, it's important sometimes to be able to take a step back and go, well, okay, maybe we don't have a use for this category anymore, or maybe it's better to reformulate this category and think of something different. Yeah. That's always an option.
But do you think the trouble we are into currently with like the transgender debate and other stuff is or outweighs the use we have from using these categories? Because I don't think that's the case.
Wait, what do you mean? Can you say that again?
Yeah, you argued that there is a use in classifying into male and female, but you also argued that there are some dangers, for example, like the harm we cause to transgender people or things like that. Would you say that one outweighs the other?
Oh no, my goal is just for people to have better. I've never gotten to have a real conversation on this because 99% of conservatives talk about it are fucking stupid as fuck. I don't know if maybe sex is a category that exists in a rigid way that is incredibly useful. Maybe even socially it's very useful. It's just very annoying to hear people take the cop-out answer of, well, no, this is very, very real and it's a very real thing and you can't change it because it's science, when that's not true at all. That's my only thing. It's entirely possible that the categories exist and are very useful and are and should remain as they are. I don't know what the answer to that is.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, then I probably just misunderstood you, because like the word social just, or at least to me, screams like there are these or as stemming from society, and I don't think sex and gender both are like, or I think gender is far more under a societal influence than the definition of sex is, for example.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, that's all
the thing, I mean, like the thing you say, you're finished your undergrad in biology, right?
Yes.
So like one thing that one I really need to fucking read about this. Maybe you'll be more familiar with this. One thing that is very interesting to me is are you familiar with do you know what taxonomy means? Is that like the same word in English and
Yes.
German? Yeah. So like
Yeah, it should be.
I think in taxonomically, we had like this massive way that we organized like all of the species throughout all the hierarchies and everything.
Yeah.
But as soon as genetic testing became available, what people started to realize was the way that we had organized the taxonomy was totally fucking incorrect. But was it really incorrect? Like it was correct insofar as, I mean, these, categories were, I guess, useful up to a certain point. But once we gathered more information, restructuring them into different categories made more sense because of, doing it on a genetic basis, right? So, I mean, like that's...
Yeah, you're kind of right. Like the whole concept of like making these trees of life was always to try to sort them by relation. So, like, I don't know, in the 1900s or in the 20th century, people just like made guesses sometimes because like they thought these groups must belong together. But then when genetic testing became available, it just was clear through the data that they weren't related, and like rearrangements were made. But it's not like, for example, mammals were a pretty stable group, and they still are. It's just that their position in the tree of life got switched around, or maybe not even that, but like
sure.
it's quite difficult to describe.
Yeah, I understand. But like, if I were to ask you, like, well, why should we arrange it around genetics rather than the system we had before? If I keep asking you this question, eventually we're going to get back to an answer. Well,
it wasn't like there was a new system. It always was like relation and I don't know what the English word is right now, but like where they came, or like ancestry might be the word. So that always was the principle behind these trees. But yeah, of course, like the decision to arrange them by ancestry, that's just
I guess I would say that that's like socially constructed, but maybe you would like to use like a different phrase for that, because socially constructed sounds kind of weird, I guess, maybe in this sense.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. For me, it would sound weird, but I get where you're coming from.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I can understand. Yeah, I understand your point.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think that like things like sex, for example, can like inform us on decisions like the one you talked about on the podcast, like sport, where you want to decide if like transgender men should be able to, transgender women should be able to compete with other women and stuff like that. I think science can give us some like meaningful, not like the definite ought, but like some information we can use to set some ground rules, I think.
Yeah, hopefully. I would hope that like most of the goals of science are to give us answers about the world that we can use to make us happier, right?
Yeah, and I think like there is some, I just wanted to basically establish that there, or at least for me, there is a use in differentiating into male and female, like from a sex standpoint, not from a gender one. And I don't think gender is a particularly useful thing, or that's at least my opinion. Like, I don't think there is a big use for having different genders. At least I don't see it at the moment. But I think that at least for the sex part, that there is a use in classifying. And sure, it's not perfect, but for example, it gives us like a good deal of information we can work with.
Yeah, for sure. I think in general, I probably agree with that. And I would probably even go a little bit harder. I would say that gender is probably a useful way of constructing society as well. Just because of how wired we are biologically, I don't know if we could live in a genderless society, even though I think that would be cool, but I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, I don't think so at all. Like,
yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to say.
From a biological standpoint, like the sense of the meaning of life is like to reproduce, and you for that alone you need some like categories or something to describe or search a mate or something, and for that alone I think you need it. And then there is like, I think, a tremendous use in things like medicine and other studies where you want to have a classification into male and female to just use as a sort of mechanism to investigate stuff.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. I guess I misunderstood you. It was just like the word social
Yeah, I mean, it's
Kinda.
pretty, like, if I was having a more nuanced conversation, like, it's a pretty loaded term, and I use it to trigger conservatives, so I could be more careful.
I understand. Like, I'm not a conservative, but like,
Yeah,
I
I
understand.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for talking.
All right, yeah, thanks for the conversation, buddy.
See you.
Bye.